and welcome to episode 24 of the Offsite podcast, where we chat all things construction and technology. My name's Carlos Cavallo.
And I'm Jason Lancini.
Now, our guest today is someone that I've known for quite a long time. He's an industry leader with regards to the adoption of technology and is the head of planning for a tier one contractor, which is BAM UK and Ireland. So it has a real focus driving that adoption of technology across the organization. Welcome to the pod, Ivor. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Ivor, it's a pleasure to meet you. Like we've not met before, but I've heard your name, and I saw your presentation that you did at an event like last year that Carlos and the team hosted. And I think for context of maybe people listening, that there's a lot of people in construction. From my perspective, there's a lot of people in construction that are talking about and writing about and saying we need to adopt technology to solve this problem or that problem. And only a percentage of those are actually doing something about it and taking steps. And I would say that for those listening, that Ivor's one of the people that are definitely doing something about it. So it's a pleasure to meet you, Ivor.
That's great. So there's always an element of talking the talk, but are you actually walking it? And there is the difficult bit. And if you are walking it, how do you actually get everyone to follow you through to actually start to deploy these new ideas, these new technologies? Very easy to keep the status quo as you go forward.
Absolutely. So, Ivor, full disclosure, over the past few weeks, we've run a bit of a mini series on AI. So we spoke to Dev, who's the CEO of Nplan, who are, I guess, a competitor to your chosen tool, which is Nodes and Links, that obviously you use at BAM. And we've also spoken to a guy called Santosh, who's a planning professional based over in Australia, who's a bit of an AI skeptic. So we're trying to get this balanced view of a vendor, a skeptic, and someone who actually embraces technology. So I guess to kick off, as obviously a tier one contractor and as a leader, what is your view on AI generally?
AI is definitely an emerging market and a capability. You've got to be careful you understand what AI is actually doing for you. And we tend to think of AI as a Star Trek element. Captain Kirk asking the computer to give some information. We are a long, long way away from that. So what is AI actually doing for us? Well, we're training it to look at a particular set of data and to provide some answers back to us from it in a particular way. And that means that we need to be clear about what is the need. What is it we're trying to actually get AI to do for us? And how is it going to provide that information? Then you need to be clear in your own mind the context in which it's providing that information. But once you've got that clear, it's very beneficial to use AI because it's providing information very quickly for you. And in a format that's easily and readily digestible. And at the end of the day, it's about humans making informed decisions. And if you're clear where the AI is getting its data, and that data is trusted data, and the information that you're getting from that data is clearly derived, then it's of great benefit. And we're starting to see it emerging on all sorts of platforms now. And the benefit is clear to be had at the end of the day. Whether it's coming from straightforward reporting of progress or reporting of change or anything of that nature, AI can start to look at a depth of history as well as consider the future and the potential future. But at the end of the day, it is information, and it's information as in Star Trek. We need to make informed decisions on what we're going to do and how we're going to manage the situation.
Yeah, I feel no matter what sort of individuals' views are on the use of AI within construction at the moment, I think the unanimous agreement is it's the rapid sort of provision of useful information that can help you make better decisions. I think that's like the clear win from using tools like that. If we think about like you as an organization, obviously first went through a process of, right, this AI technology now exists in the market. Did you sort of initially push that because of like a clear use case that you were maybe sort of pitched, or was there sort of this, I guess, sense of pressure from industry that this technology exists, so we need to understand it and extract value from it?
I think it's definitely, we need to do things better, and we need to do things faster. There's no doubt about it. Our world has changed in the last 10 years with technology. I've been in the industry some 40 years, and I have to say that for 30 years it was rather stagnated. And then suddenly, the idea of managing data and structuring data has been a big driving force in the industry over the last 10 years. And I come back to trusted data that, if we start to think about how we use or generate data and how we store that data in a format that is clear to use, we did that for a human to understand. But that data doesn't have to be so well structured when you get to AI. And so you've got a pool of information. And as long as you trust that information in terms of where it's come from, whether it's accurate or not, you can then start to think about how you can chop and dice that information. And then, say you have to be clear about what it is that you're going to get out of it and how you're going to use it going forward. So the industry is almost naturally going forward with technology, and certainly with the advent of BIM, as we used to call it. That was sort of 2010, 13 as that came out. That's restructured our thinking entirely about software platforms and how we use it. And we've certainly moved from that computer that sat onto the desk, almost going back to the early days of mainframes where information are held centrally. And we're doing more and more of that, but with platforms providers such as AFEX and many others, where we are holding our own data on trusted third-party platforms. We're starting to have that sensible discussion now of how we actually prize that data out and start to use it beneficially and add to our other platforms and systems, so that we're getting a mix of data rather than just pure data as an aspect of a singular topic.
Yeah, that's the broad data set is really important. In fact, we had a conversation with Santosh in the last call, and because this was in the context of QRSA, so using AI for QRSA, and like one of the big problems was it's only looking at scheduled data. So we lack a lot of context that you could get from other systems and other data sets. So it's definitely quite an important aspect to this at the moment, because we need to be looking broader. We need these, you want a platform to understand everything rather than small sort of slices of data across different systems within the organization. I guess that does kind of lend itself to the vision of BIM.
You've got to be careful here, because you might use AI to look at a whole host of programs in the past, and to understand really why have they changed, what activities in that program have extended, how contract completion dates change, how planned completion dates change. So there's a lot of things that have gone on in programs historically. And yes, you can apply AI to that. And you can say, right, okay, here's my current working program. We're just about to start this job. And what sort of time risk do I need to allocate to this program? And you can get the AI to look at past, and it will look at the descriptions, how you ordered your activities, and compare that to your new program and generate some time allowance. Because it now begins to recognize that because of the order of events in the program, we're putting CFA piles in, or we're doing some marine piling, or whatever. It understands what it is that you're doing, but it doesn't understand the context of the change. Now, it could be that the piling, you had 10 weeks in there, but it took 12 weeks on average when you look at history. But it could be for a multitude of systems. Anything from, actually, we got something like 20% more work instructed, or we found some unforeseen ground conditions, or production rate was wrong. You don't know quite what the context is with all that. So that sort of AI, how do you use that? What sort of context does that have? And as a contractor, yes, I can use that, but I've got to be careful here because it's not only got my uncertainties and my risk in there, it's got the client's uncertainties and risks in there. It's also got third-party uncertainties and risks in there. So you go, okay, this is actually a great tool to work with the client with to understand our global risks. But for my own risk, I then need to think about using QSRA in terms of actually analyzing the uncertainty in my own program and coupling that with risk as an analytical process, then using Monte Carlo to understand how that potentially might impact my program. And that gives me a standard distribution curve, which enables me to understand my risk, my potential time risk. Then it's quite interesting to compare the two because you can start talking with a client and say, well, historically, this is the time we need to allow for a program. We've done our own analysis and we believe we have a time risk of Y. Your X is much bigger than Y. So we could work collectively together to start managing those risks. And so, we are more and more getting into a cooperative approach to project delivery, and our clients are getting more and more involved. So if you like, this is the next step of the journey as we go forward.
Absolutely. So on the theme of, I guess, the journey, within the AI space, so if we think about AI applications, the pace of development is really fast, right? So new capabilities turn up every day. Existing applications just sort of develop into bigger and better things. Most tech companies are like integrating into the ecosystem. How difficult does that make your job in terms of picking tools, piloting tools, and purchasing tools when the landscape changes on such a at such a pace?
Yeah, the landscape of the art of planning isn't changing. We still have to sit down as humans and consider the logical sequence of building something. It could be in time that AI does come in and take over that role. And it will look at the 3D model and it will recognize all the items in there. And why wouldn't AI then start to consider the order it should be done? I mean, the duration that you'll need for each activity. But, if you go into a hospital, there are surgeons that are using AI at the moment to actually consider how they're going to carry out a particular operation. And there may be some element of automation in there in order to get the accuracy. But even with the surgeon, at the end of the day, they're using this as information. They are looking at it and applying the human sensibility to it to say, is this logical? Is this really the right way to do it? And what will happen is they will tweak it to get the product or the output that they are looking for, they believe is actually necessary for the patient himself. And what you're actually doing is speeding up the process and allowing those who have the knowledge then to make the final adjustments to get what they need. But the counter to this is, okay, if we got AI doing that, and you've got a generation like myself who would say, oh, that's not quite right, we need to tweak that. What happens with future generations that haven't got my experience, and where do they get that experience from? So we'll never have AI as a 100% output for everything we do. We do have to bring people on to understand what it is that's actually physically happening out there, be able to assimilate that sort of information in their mind. But yes, then start to use AI to speed up that process and get a better output and probably a faster output and learning curve for themselves as they go forward. So it's a very careful balance as we go forward.
Yeah, it leaves you in a pretty dangerous spot if people end up at this, like, the point with no skills. It's a bit like if you have driverless cars and no one knows how to drive the car. If the machine stops, like, how do you actually deal with that? You need to have that base.
Well,
Right, Jason's never stayed quiet for 15 minutes before. I've got one more question before I hand over. From what you've implemented so far, what results have you seen if you were to sort of pin it on one particular output or achievement?
well, that's very, very difficult. We are looking for more and more information that's laid out about it, and as we go forward, we're looking for things to happen. Our projects are getting bigger and more complicated, and without doubt, I've been reviewing a 40,000 line program for a significant project in billions. How do you do that? And to be honest with you, you cannot get into the nitty gritty of it. A team have put this program together over several months. And suddenly they're asking me, can you go and spend a couple of weeks doing a review of this? Well, you have to have an element of trust of the professionalism of the planners that are working on it. But there are some basic tests and approach that you can start to apply to it. And with that, yes, the health of the program is the first thing I go to. I'm interested to understand the density of connectivity of the activities, the links, the predecessors and the successors, how they've been put together. I'm interested to know how detailed is this program? What is the maximum duration built into this program for an activity? And you might set yourself some rules that really anything greater than 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you don't really know what's going on in there. It needs breaking down further so you understand the program better. Obviously, the level of program you're working at is obviously going to have a big drive on that. Then you start to want to understand, okay, how many activities don't actually have any successes, they're just floating there. Now, I talk about that not as an AI, but as a bit of technology that can go rooting around a program, finding all that out. But what it is telling me is how robust, how healthy is that program to change if you start to restructure it, or I call it like poking a wet sponge. If the program's not well structured, you can poke it and you make a little wet pool around your finger, but the sponge doesn't change shape. And that's because it's too loose.
The same thing happens with Carlos, actually, if you poke in.
Well, I think it's probably a little bit structured. Now, how's your health? So why to say that is, well, when you actually start to think about QSRA and the Monte Carlo, what you're doing is introducing change into activity, uncertainty, more time into that activity. And if it's a wet sponge, then the Monte Carlo can do all these things. And at the end of it, basically nothing's changed because you're just trying to poke this wet sponge. You need something a bit more structured. So, okay, doing a QSRA is quite difficult on a 40,000 line program. That takes some weeks. I've only got a couple of weeks. So I can start thinking about using AI, knowing that actually, yes, I've got everyone's issues and risks in here, but I'm going to get a very quick output in a matter of a couple of hours. And I can start to think about how that aligns with the approach and the program, the time risk they've actually got in that program. So I'm already in a position to make some judgments about that program. Then after that, the human element comes in. You sit down with a planner for a day and you start asking them questions on how they put this together. Have I actually physically looked at the program? No. Have I actually opened the program? No. I'm using technology to inform me to ask the right questions.
Ivor, that's if I was to break my silence, even though Carlos had a go at me, I was maintained my silence because I was intently listening and finding it very interesting. So that's the difference, Carlos, I guess, to other meetings we might be in. um,
Well, I'm not normally
So,
that
Ivor,
interesting,
one of the things that
honestly.
we talk,
I can think
one
of
of the
better
things that we
topics to
talked
talk
about
about.
in previous weeks, one of the things that we talked about in previous weeks was about use cases for emerging capabilities of artificial intelligence, and um, you brought up some really interesting ones that we hadn't discussed, which is so obviously there's the review of a schedule and having some sort of, whether it's AI or just literally some logic, go and check links and the more basic USRA. And your example of risk and considering it like a global risk from a client side is interesting as well. Are there any use cases that you're seeing as viable at the moment in terms of during the delivery of a project? Because we posited some ideas last week, but they might be a ways off.
Well, yes, we're getting a lot of technology now that can write reports for you on an automated basis. And there's a lot of platforms now which will compare programs. And obviously within the construction industry, especially within the UK, we use NEC form of contract, where we submit a program on a monthly basis. And we also provide a commentary that goes with that. And AI is starting to come into this area. Certainly, I'm having discussions with platforms now where we're asking for, here is the program we submitted last month, here is the program we're submitting this month. And the softwares can certainly go in there and detect, okay, what's changed between the two programs. It can tell you which activities have been extended, which activities have been completed, which activities have been completed ahead of schedule or behind, and any logic links that have been changed in there. That then has to be built back into some sort of commentary, which can take a fair bit of time to do. And, you might spend a couple of days putting that commentary together to submit your package. But AI can provide that commentary, and it comes back to the position where I was saying, well, having got a commentary, you can tweak it and make the changes that you think should be, the context in which it should be going over. The information is the information, but the way it's couched, or perhaps the position it's taking, isn't quite right. So all the hard work of the commentary is being derived. And what you're able to do now is go through that 2 or 3 page report and make the tweaks to give it the context you believe it should have to go forward to the client. Client can equally do the same and consider it from their point of view going forward. Obviously, where we get more clarity working with the client, I would like to think that, yes, we can actually generate commentary that is neutral, and we can all support in terms of its context and the information it's providing. So you have that, but then it's quite a short step to think about how do you manage change in the program and the impact of change in the program. And again, you're only comparing, here is our original intended plan, and change has now occurred. This is the new consequence of that change. And you can start thinking about using AI to provide reports on matters such as free floats in the program that's being used up, how that's affecting your resource leveling in the program, how it might be impacting on critical dates and the end date. So, it's a fairly quick way to get out a fairly instant output on the impact of change. Where does a human come into that? Well, the human has to add the bars in the program to reflect change. And obviously those become the bars, which are the new bars, which it's picking up on. And then the report is talking about those new bars and how it's impacting the program.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. I think a lot of people, when we think about this, immediately go to grand outcomes of like Big Brother, automated scheduling, those sorts of things. But AI has proven already that summarization is like a really good power that it has kind of in the capability today. And there's a lot of admin, busy work, time spent across lots of parts of different businesses and in construction and in planning and managing change. I think that's a really great examples. And I was probably, when we started this like series of conversations, probably sitting more on the skeptic fence, and I've kind of been moved the needle the other way.
I'll tell you a little story. It goes back in history. And when we used to thrash grain, it used to be physically done by hand. The crop would be gathered from the fields, and it would be physically thrashed by hand using sticks and twigs and things like that, and then tossed in the air to get the seed out.
I'm not going to make any comment about Carlos again now, either.
Well, the thrashing machine then arrived, and of course that put a lot of people out of work, and they were landowners who were being killed over it. There was quite a rebellion over it. You come to today, you wouldn't entertain harvesting a field without a combine harvester. That's the technology. So what's changed? Yes, there's not so many people involved anymore, and the skill sets that are being deployed are much higher than they used to be. But the yield we get out of it allows humans to go and do something else. So this is just technology where things are going to happen quicker. You may not need such a big team, but you need to actually embrace change and know that the job you're doing today is not necessarily the job you're going to be doing tomorrow. But with the advent of technology is opportunity. And we couldn't say that because of the thrash machine and we stopped beating the seed out, that's been detrimental to human society, human race. We adapted in the end, and we are what we are today. And really that analogy needs to be thought about as we go forward. Things will get better. There'll be different opportunities and jobs that we haven't even thought about just yet. But that will provide a quality of life. We cannot really believe we should go back to beating the seed out of the stalks to get our oat or wheat or whatever it is.
Yeah. On the on that topic, I might change pace slightly. And Ivor, one of the things that I know that listening to this podcast are a bunch of people. I'm thinking of a couple that are in heads of planning roles at sort of tier one contractors in different places around the world. And lots of them are either going through or thinking about going through some sort of process to like build consensus or implement some sort of technology, whether it's AI or any other thing. I guess I'd be super interested to understand, like, one, how do you separate like fluff from things that are valuable when you're getting like a million different technology vendors shouting at you to adopt them versus another thing? How do you build momentum or consensus within an organization? And then maybe what is the process that you think about? Is it like pilots? Is it like a bottom up approach, or are you getting sort of top down consensus? That's my like mega question to finish over.
Well, you've covered about 4 or 5 different areas there. So that is a mega question. It'll probably take me 20 minutes to answer it. Yes, first of all, you've got to actually understand what is the need in a business. What do you really need? There's a lot of technology out there and very shiny things. But you've got to remember, I mean, I've got a community of some 200 planners, and they're very busy people. And the last thing they want is to play around with toys which they can see no value for. It doesn't give them any benefit at all. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to take you anywhere if you just give them something that they can immediately use. So you've got to think about technology and the approach that you're taking and where you would like to be in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, and how you're going to implement that. And when you implement it, you've got to implement it in a way that gives benefit to the end user. They can actually see that they're going to get something out of this new bit of technology. It's going to make their life a little bit easier to use. And then you need to think about, this is a lot of change for individuals, and focus how you introduce that change. There's a lot of sheep dip approach to change, that everyone gets to know everything all at once, and that frightens people. If you can actually target change at individual or groups so that they know that this new bit of technology is coming out and they're going to get this or that out of it. And the reason why we would like you to do that is because we need this at the center. And we've already got a plan of how we're going to couple that with other information. So, the prime example we have is that we now ask our planners to code their program. There's a separate column which gives some basic coding about new works, existing planned works, our baseline, our start dates, all this sort of stuff. It's not huge, and I think basically there's about 10 or 12 codes. That's all we're asking them to use, and it comes as a drop-down column. They get benefit out of it because they can actually filter all this information out, and they can see directly themselves the change. I get benefit at the center because I can start to analyze programs, because I can see everyone's programs, and I can start to use technology to understand which program has been submitted to the client, because those are the ones I'm interested in out of the hundreds of programs that are there, the what-if programs, what have you. And that allows me to start to understand for each project the change that's going on from month to month, and allow me to actually link that then with commercial information. Now, commercial will go looking at that and go, oh, actually, that's really good. I don't understand this number or that number. Why is that? And you start saying, well, we need to have some structured approach on the commercial side in terms of how this information comes together. So it grows, and it starts to get arms and legs, and it starts to get traction. This isn't done overnight. This is done over years. And that's why I say it's important not just to talk it and be far ahead of yourself, but to walk it, not run it, and get yourself to a position where everyone's coming on board with you as you go forward.
So Ivor, to double click on that, just before, I know Carlos will probably be watching the clock, but to double click on that bit, do you find that the approach of, if you're trying to validate some new technology or approach or software or whatever it is to start with some like small pilots? Do you let projects do their own things and then bubble that information up? Or is it more like you sort of try and think about it centrally, you get some consensus in the business and then roll it in? Which way seems to work best for you?
Well, first of all, you've got to understand the need at the sharp end of the business, because they are making the money for you. I'm an overhead. I'm a service industry. I'm here to provide a service at the end of the day. So there's no point me inventing something that no one wants to use, because basically I'll go bust. I'll go out of business, not surprisingly. So I really need to provide something that the end user, the people at the sharp end who are paying my wages at the end of the day, want to use and get value out of it. But at the same time, I've got another finance group above me who are very interested to understand how are we doing as a business and where are we going. So there's a very fine balancing act between that, and that's all about project controls at the end of the day. So what do? Yes, we understand the need from both directions, and we start to bring together approaches that would enable us to, if you like, service both ends of the business that we're in. And we will actually get user groups together, and we'll invite people in management, but also people at the sharp end. There is nothing wrong with having the site engineer or the assistant planner sitting in with all the managers and people high up in the company. And you create time and gaps for these people. They're not used to sort of sitting in such a meeting, and certainly don't understand actually their opinion is incredibly valuable. We really need to know and understand what you think about this and why this may or may not work. from there, you can start to formulate how you're going to go about this, how you're going to meet the needs at the sharp end, because clearly we need them to use this, how that will furnish the output that's required further up the business and right up to board level. You then start thinking about how you would implement it. And to be honest with you, we start off modeling this on very, very simple projects. And we have what we call in the business the bridge project, which is a very simple 50-line program, which we know absolutely inside out. And we will test the environment against that and change things on that and manipulate it and get it into a position where we are getting the platforms, the software or whatever it is that we're trying to get adopted working. And then we will get an existing project and apply that to see if we can get scalability into the product. Then when we feel that that is working properly, we then introduce that onto a couple of trial projects out in the business itself. This can take the best part of 6 months, maybe 9 months to actually do. And I always keep on saying to people, look, if we get it right, in 2 years' time, we'll look back. The fact that we were 2 months late or we took 3 months longer than we should have, is that really going to matter? And the answer is no. You know, people want things to work, and they want it to work in a particular way so that they can do their job. And they're doing their job is about making money at the end of the day. So, we're here to make money.
Absolutely. Right. I'm going to have to cut everyone off there. We have gone way over time. That time really did disappear quickly, which is testament to how interesting it was. So, thank you very much for joining today, Ivor.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Ivor.